Now is the time for nerds to rejoice. That's what the next couple of hours are going to be all about. The gist of where we're going is we're going to talk about the integration of Canvas and SIS data into dashboards. And
so that the recording box disappears. Yeah, just click out. No, my back, so I don't know how to do it. Great, thank you.
earlier we were talking about the data from a Canvas perspective. That's what feeds the dashboards. And to restate what I keep on trying to hammer home, naming is key. Words matter. Keep things short and sweet. Avoid additional coding. Now, the first challenge with this is Canvas and SIS, and can they talk together? Both systems do some similar things, but they are distinct and separate. SIS holds a lot of the infrastructure. Canvas is actually classroom kind of stuff. SIS may hold final grades. Canvas holds kind of the what's going on in the semester, participation, etc. The key was figuring out how to get the two to talk together. And that was a heck of a lot of fun. Even more so is not just on a class level, but also on an individual level. Because Canvas is pretty limited on the demographic information that it had. And as a researcher, I am always interested in, I want to know about what I always call the 5: age, gender, ethnicity, Pell status, and first generation. At a minimum, everything I put out, I try to have those variables available on a human level. Now, most Canvas courses, like we talked about earlier, are loaded in from SIS, but not all. Vast majority are loaded. Where it starts getting fun, when you're working with two distinctly different systems, they have their own conventions. One would hope that the term code, in this case for fall of 2025, will be 4256, very intuitive, right? Canvas has a totally different 4-digit code. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So that'll be part of that campus consideration and recoding, is thinking about how far do you want to go back, and then hunting and pecking to figure out, okay, what is the code in Canvas so that I can filter in Canvas so that this whole data source will work in Tableau. The same with employee IDs, templates. Canvas has their own thing. But they have a really cool table that is a conversion table they call pseudonyms. It's just a fun word to say, but not to spell. Now, there are a couple of key fields I'll show you all in a little while that make things extremely simple. One is coming from the pseudonyms table. Another one is the LMS. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it gives me the ability to join very easily between the two systems. And recognize finally that both systems are massive. They have an immense amount of data, which creates a problem when you're creating a complex series of joins to create a data source across multiple systems. Speed is a really serious issue. Not on the bullet point, but a second issue that we had a nice conversation about right before break, or actually right after break, is the issue of confidentiality and data governance, et cetera. A lot of concerns about who all can see all of the data. And so that's going to be a kind of an ongoing conversation and challenge in this arena and many others. The key is I try to keep things as small as possible So every time I had a chance, I try to filter stuff out. But I wrote this data source specifically for Australia, with the caveat is here is how you would want to customize it for your individual college, trying to make it scalable. Now, a couple of observations from my perspective in this challenge. I had tried doing everything in Tableau desktop. It was generating half a terabyte file sizes that were incredible, very unsatisfying from a work experience. Prep gives me more flexibility because it has a different purpose. Desktop is designed to create dashboards to make data pretty. Prep is cleaning it so that it works efficiently. The combination makes a lot of sense. Some people are SQL gurus. I am not. I have modest skills in it, but I lean on tools that I do have strong skills in to make it work for me. And in practical realities, the coding in Tableau is a variation of SQL, but they give you a lot of cheats that make it a heck of a lot easier. Syntax is a lot more forgiving. Again, like I mentioned, streamline as much data as humanly possible. And as Jake mentioned a little while ago, when you're working with descriptive fields, use a text editor. Get rid of the formatting. And Gateway cringed with this. When you're bringing in data, learning outcomes that were already introduced into Canvas, you're going to have to hard code a lot of stuff. There's no getting around that to make it work. That's the practical realities. That's the debugger side. I can help. I can show you how not to do a lot of things and how to do a few things. Cindy has been very patient with me trying to explain some really crazy stuff. And one question, and this is a rhetorical question, is really how proficient in Tableau coding you are. If you've never done a code in your life, this is going to be really hard. If you're a SQL developer, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I was somewhere in the middle. But even a guy with a Texas public education can figure this out. So you can do it. And I've given you some clues about how to get where you want to go. This is where it starts getting really wonky. I'll spare the history that I shared with a couple of folks during the break about changes in Canvas. This is in specific to Canvas Data 2. When you're getting into the data source and creating Tableau stuff, when you get into it, you're going to start noticing a lot of really crazy things. One thing is how they create unique identifiers in the Canvas data. If you're not a data person, a unique identifier is this is the one element that says this is special in this whole table. In about every table I've looked at in Canvas, they have a field which has the same name, key.id, which is lovely when you're trying to join a dozen tables because they all share the same stinking name. It drove me nuts for a long time. So if you're working with Canvas data and you want to bring it in with SIS data and do all kinds of stuff with it, you may want to strongly consider as a part of your flow in Tableau prep to do some renaming along the way to make it make more sense. What I did a lot of times is I included the table name in front of the key ID. Let's say account.id, classes.id. Another fun element. In the past, prior to 6 months ago, when Canvas shared its data, they had a separate table for about everything. I believe they were bought out, and I think the new owners are like, I don't like your data structure. We're going to get away from a data schema to a more of a relational database stuff, which basically means every table's name and every field's name changed, which really made it fun trying to reinvent this thing. The second thing that is really funky about this is something they call context. A lot of your tables are going to be very specific about which account it's a part of, like economics or English or Spanish humanities. But a lot of tables also are going to have course context, like the section that that course is associated with. Instead of creating separate fields in all these tables or creating separate tables, they have a field called context. There's one called context type, and it's either going to be an account or it's going to be a class. They have a context ID. This is on the slides. I will be sharing these with you all. And the context ID, that's the unique identifier. And that's either going to be an account code or a course code, which are identified in the account or course tables. And finally, there's the context code, which is a concatenation or a joining of the context type and the ID. Extremely clear? If you say yes, you are lying. This is extremely kludgy from my perspective, and I'm sure others have a problem. It was really odd to work with. One more fun factoid about the data. Some tables only have an account context. Some tables only have a course context. So through the process of elimination, I had to figure out, is this a course, an account, or both in this table? So if you're doing any development in it, just have that in the back of your mind and take a look very quickly in that table, what context types are available. That will help you figure it out much quicker than I did. Cindy, you are nodding a lot to what I'm saying. Cindy has been working with this data for quite a while at Glendale. And, she's been very patient with.
I know he knows object, but
You look so much like my sister. I'm sorry. I know you very well.
promise, yeah.
It's the,
No, this is a
Getting
lot. This is a lot. You did, all the figuring out of that back end stuff. So even this, if it looks like a lot, that's nothing bigger. Had to figure out.
I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the slide, but it's just kind of good to note. You might want to look at it at your leisure. For those of you who are not just absolute deities when it comes to SQL, there's a ton of stuff you can do. One of my favorites is pivoting. I get some data sets where every field is in a separate column, like the Department of Ed data from Arizona. Every grade level is in a separate column. That doesn't work well for creating dashboards. I need them in rows. Tableau Prep does a really easy way of being able to flip it from rows to columns or columns to rows. You can do joins on calculations in ways you cannot do in desktop. There are a lot of little features you can do differently. And 95% of everything I've tried in prep will work in desktop. 95% of everything I do in desktop will work in prep. There are a few things that work differently, and some things just won't work in desktop or prep. It's frustrating, and it's a hunt and peck kind of thing. But my favorite thing about prep is it is a tool designed to clean up messy data, and this is messy data. In spite of our best efforts with Canvas, it's going to come in a way, particularly when trying to join it with SIS, that is a mess. Got to figure out how to make it work. What I love about prep is once I've done the heavy lifting, the good work, I can publish that data source as a single file to the Tableau server and have it automatically refresh overnight. So that when I run my dashboards, they automatically update overnight, and they're hitting very frequently updated information as a public data source. Extremely easy to do so. that was probably the biggest improvement to, that led me to go back to using prep almost exclusively when I'm designing complex stuff. Now, this is a bird's eye view of what I'm going to call the flow. Which, if you can read this, you need to probably be a bird of prey. The font is extremely small. I'm going to zoom in different portions in a little bit. Now, I'm doing this more as a, for people who work with stuff, you chuckle because it's just such a rat's nest. But what I love about it is it's sequential. I can kind of choose the sequence and order that I do things. And was very much a process of elimination. What is the most efficient way to group it? Now, for visual purposes, I like kind of going with, on top, I have my SIS data. And on the bottom, below that blue line, I have the Canvas data. Matt, is this coming through? Okay. This just gives me a visual cue about how it all flows. And this, some people say it looks like a fishbone, but it's just a visual cue about how it all works together. So let's go get into that rabbit hole of data. The data sets are immense. So one of the tricks, one of the political things that I had to deal with, because colleges are not necessarily joyous to share how they're doing one against the other. Data governance issues and a whole lot more going on. So to be respectful of that, combined with to reduce the amount of load I'm having to deal with to generate my data set, I restrict my data source to my college. Now, the good news for you is I went through and I took the approach of that's going to be one of the front end things of that fishbone. Think of it as a river. You have the headwater where the spring comes out of the ground and it flows down, flows down, flows down. It comes to the Mississippi River and then hits the Atchafalaya Basin. A whole other geology lesson. But the gist of it is go to the headwater where the spring starts. And if I restrict it to just my college, everything running through that flow is just going to be from my college. I cut it by the data set by a factor of 10, roughly. Close enough that I'm going to go. Now, another social systems concern, political concern, concerns about student identification, FERPA, PII. Sometimes people get concerned for good reason that you don't want to identify a single student or a small group of students. If I'm teaching a course and there's only one short, fat, straight white guy from Texas, I don't want a dashboard to make it very clear that I did not ask for these questions. I would be uncomfortable. So there is a tool that I used in this to be able to say, take a look at the demographic that I'm reviewing. And if the count is less than 5, show it as a group less than 5 instead of the descriptor. Simple calculation, but a really big revelation. Now, the key thing is we got to make sure that you can use new Canvas data effectively. And that gets back to the conversation and the preaching about naming, starting with an ILO, PLO, CLO, et cetera. But you're going to have to do some retrofitting as well. And that's probably the most mundane thing I'm going to share all day. I think Jackie will attest to it, is doing some of that retro coding. And for those in the room, I've shared some lists of some of those things you might have to code around. And if you're good, I hope most of your short descriptions are short descriptions, and they're not. Your passion is saying, yeah, they're not, and it cracks me. Now, furthermore, I sought out opportunities, depending on the table, to try to restrict the terms. institutions have been around for 40 plus years in this district. You're not going to want to show 40 years worth of data. Arbitrarily, for Estrella, we started dashboarding data in fall 2018. Why? Because we went from 8 learning ILOs to 3. HLC criterion changed around then as well, so it made sense. That's where we started. For your college, it may be different. Maybe you want to start now. Then the coding's not a problem. But if you have historic data, you're going to have to do some recoding around it. But restricting the amount of terms that show up in the raw data will greatly improve the performance of your flow. Make sense? You want the bad man to stop or you want to discuss? Just please chime in. Now, the key twist on this, and I did a rewrite last month on the data set, was the realization that we were not capturing in the dashboards those courses which were not from SIS. Najma's class, we were missing the data. And some other examples. So we had to come up and kind of trick the system, figure out ways so that we can capture that information because it's there. If you are measuring outcomes, it's saved in Canvas. And it's actually saved in one mother of all tables. You just can't see it through the Canvas reporting, but through the Tableau side, you're having the ability to see the kitchen sink. So I recognize reports that you see in Canvas are really useful for some debugging, but you're not seeing the whole picture because you have the keys to the kingdom when you have this access. Use it wisely. And if there's anything I can talk about now outside of the technical, is be prepared for misunderstandings, limitations, challenges, emotions surrounding the data. People are all for accountability as long as it's not them being held accountable. People fear that this data is going to be used as a bludgeon instead of a tool to get better at your craft. It's a mindset. This is a huge cultural shift, and it's not simple or easy. So be aware, there are going to be people who question why you're doing it, why you're not doing it. There are going to be people loving having the data out there. There's going to be people who give you any warning. Do not go down the path of enabling the opportunity for people to opt in or opt out. Because with this kind of data, if you start giving that degree of opting in and opting out, you're going to be spending your time as a systems administrator. And that's not what I signed up. I said I will not support that detail. That's my opinion. I'm respectful of it, and I have support from administration and our SAC council. So think about that one. I want to be very cognizant, create cognizance of concerns about a lot of pushback. That's been part of us growing as a college. We're falling down the
Do you have any strategies that you use to overcome people's fears of it being used punitively? Did you guys have a method or something to that effect?
Yeah, quite often I would go into my office and crawl into a fetal state. A lot of times I try not to go into a meeting until I already know the answer. I try to understand before being understood. And so I try to get people to flesh out, these are my hesitations, my reservations, my concerns. Get that on the table, because you can't get to the logic until you get the emotion out. So a lot of just sitting down hard. Some people won't do that. That's where I had to go hardcore and say, I'm just not going to do that opt out. That's because if we allow one, all of a sudden half of the college is going to opt out. Yeah, that's really the
Your question was about what's it going to be like if people were worried about it being punitive.
Yeah.
So one thing that we are doing right now, assuming it gets approved, and it only directly affects the faculty is we added into our college plan, which is the agreement between faculty and academic affairs. Specifically, that assessment data is not used for faculty evaluation. And, you know, and that, in fact, it's best practice if faculty are identifying problem areas to assess. So we kind of even try to push them to like, don't just assess it because you know it's going to turn out well, like you should be assessing. So that's one way that, you know, we've messaged that before, but this is the first time we've actually put it into the college plan flat out saying this is not used for evaluation.
That's good.
That's fine.
We'll cover that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share, I mean, maybe let's wait to see if we approve this language.
Right.
Right now, the assessment team has written it, but I'm happy to share it.
Yeah, just mitigation and honesty, you know. And that's why I asked the question early in today's session about, on the reflection time of just, what are your beliefs about assessment? And I think it's important to ask that question because for me, belief is everything's about improvement. Everything is about understanding and getting better. I take a lot of pride in what I do. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. But I want to get better. If folks have something that's blocking that ability, talk about it, talk through it. Identify barriers to participation and try to mitigate them. Removing obstacles from participation. And that's why I like this so much, because one of the reasons people don't assess is because they say, I don't have time to do another system. I don't know how to capture the data. I don't know. And they're the reasons they give, and they're the excuses they give. And most of them are legitimate, some are not. So what we did was we tried to come up with a way so that grade and you grade, it's capturing your data. That was the biggest principle from an academic side, from an IR side, is how can we automate this so that we're not killing ourselves or wanting to. Now, a lot of different elements in prep. I don't know how many of y'all use prep? How many of y'all use it a lot? Cool. How many of y'all never want to see it again? You're going to love the next hour. I have data sources, cleanup steps, joins, aggregations. That's not aggravations. I have those too. Output. Data sources. They look kind of like a circle with a spreadsheet in it. That's a technical definition. Cleanup steps. They look like a flat line with a lot of stuff going on. These are where you make changes, renamings, etc. Joins. Here are my favorite Venn diagrams, overlapping circles. With these, when you're bringing in two different tables or even data sources, this is where you can say, I want to get everything from this one and only the matching elements from the other. You can do left joins, right joins, unions, or interunions. Got a lot of options. Aggregation. I love using this because sometimes, in spite of my best efforts, I create duplication in my tables. This is where a lot of times, if something's getting really too big, I can just tell it to count how many times its records are repeated. And it'll only show once, and then it'll give a count of how many times it's repeated. I can delete the calculation for how many times it's repeated because I don't care. I get rid of it. Sometimes I've cut my data set in half or more running aggregation when I didn't do a great job in the first place. It lets me save myself from myself. And finally, output in the flow looks like an oil drum. Documentation for prep is so blooming easy. Not much worse than having to sit down and write a 40-page document explaining how and why it works, where it comes from, etc. In prep, I can actually build in my own documentation at each step along the way. And that way people don't have to find a PDF, which explains how it all works. With this, you have 200 characters, so you need to write the haiku, not long verse. But you can say roughly what's going on in the step without having to open it. You see that little message box, the cartoon character? When you click on that, it hides it. You click on it again, it unhides it. A streamlining to restrict to a single college. Now this is where we start kind of getting the practical realities of this data set. You might find this useful if you're going to work with Canvas data down the road. Two tables, one I didn't know about for a long time. I love this combination. The accounts table. How many accounts for Canvas does Maricopa own? One. So guess how many accounts are in this table? A lot. They used to have separate fields in the accounts table. Where it had like the parent account, the sub 2, and the sub 3, and the sub 4, down to sub 10 or so. It was ridiculous to work with. So they got really clever. They created in this accounts table a parent account. It's actually not a parent account. It's like you're a grandparent. Maricopa's the grandparent. I'm the parent. The individual accounts within it are more like your children. Because Maricopa has one license, but there are various parent accounts. And there's a code for parent account for each of the colleges. This filter that I use filters so that in my case, I only wanted to have the parent account for Estrella. Or if my grandfather was the one that created this, I want to be able to say just my grandfather. There's a parent account that is all of Maricopa. But the downside is parent account for all Maricopa combines all of Maricopa. So there's a second kind of account. Isn't this just so logical and simple? The second kind of account called the key ID, which is for each sub account, like accounting or English or Spanish humanities, they have a separate ID number. You'll use that sometimes, but sometimes for those learning outcomes that are associated with the college-wide level, you kind of cheat. You use the key ID that matches your parent account. This query captures both, or this portion of the query. And I join it. This is where we start getting into the fun thing about contents. This is a circumstance where I'm not sure many of my tables, if it's associated, if the data joins on the course or it joins on an account level. This course account associations table, I shortened to CAA because course account associations is too dang long. Visually, I can't recognize it. So I shortened it a little bit. It gives me a lot of fields, most of which I never use. The two I do. One is the account ID, and the second is the course ID. And if I join these two, like I did here, and clean up O2, it gives me the ability to select only the accounts for Estrella. And within Estrella, these are all the course IDs that I need from my college. So furthermore, it's a way of restricting. Really handy trick. When you join, because I did some renaming, course ID to course ID, intuitive, it's an inner join. I'm only making sure that they match up. in this case. Talked about limiting data by term. This is another one of these fun things you just got to listen to Uncle Jim on. There are going to be many instances where you know the term you want. You're just going to have to find the Canvas code. For Estrella, we started with the Canvas, the term code of 4157, which for us was credit fall 2018. But there were instances where when we input the learning outcome or input the class, we just said default term. We didn't declare which term it was about. If you didn't declare a term, it shows up as an enrollment term of 1006. Just accept it, roll with it. It's one of those things.
Jim, there was a question in the chat too. Did you?
Yeah, if you,
Okay, so it said, what percentage of your residential faculty are participating? And I think there was some clarification as far as by participating. If they managed to clarify what capacity, learning, Canvas overall, SLO, excuse me, SLO, ILOs. But it sounds like the main question is what percentage of faculty are participating in assessing, unless they put it unmute.
regrettably small. But that is one of the, really small. I want to be candid about. But one of the benefits that I mentioned earlier is that when people are developing a new course or they're rewriting and updating a current course and there are monies involved, it is a requirement to build in either a program or a course level learning outcome. And so if I'm a faculty member and that's the course shell I get to work with, it's already built in. So that's how we're going to build it without having to force a whole lot of it. And once it's built in and rolls in, the instructor doesn't have to do anything new, which tries to mitigate one of those reasons why there is lower participation. Does that answer that question?
Waiting.
Off the top of my head, I can't give a solid percentage, but it's still sadly low,
Yes, someone small amount, yes.
realistic.
And Jim, you may have mentioned this earlier, but how do you require the faculty to participate? You mentioned a couple of times about, like, the money is tied to doing
The
this.
course development. That is probably the strongest time. We also, as a part of our assessment committee, really encourage, we have, each division has a representative who sits on it. We really get them to encourage participation, assessment, and discussion.
Okay.
So it's kind of a word of mouth thing. For folks who want to publish, this is a great mechanism to kind of gather that data. So it's you're always, for those who want to overachieve, they're going to do it first. For those who never want to do anything, they're going to live up to your expectations. The challenge is finding those who don't. So that's part of those socials. That the bigger challenge that Julie and her group has to struggle with, to figure out how do we get more involved. Any question? One more element, and this is ugly. I just got tired, and so I wrote it the way I wrote it. It pulls over everything. It pulls over course names that include master, whether in upper or lower case. So I wrote it so it could capture both. It includes sometimes the word sandbox or copy or test. This gives me the ability to get rid of that stuff before it ever shows up to the dashboard. Because otherwise it's hard to explain why it is what it is. So this was simply a way to get to there. And in the course name, I've discovered that for us, all of the ones that I want to keep start with EM. Instead of having limited number of colleges that have, because we all have our different prefixes. That's a little more work. There's a field called campus in Canvas. Instead of institution, campus doesn't have the number 10 in front of it or whatever. 10 is a straight up. This is just cleaner. It's more intuitive to me. You're going to get into a lot of cleanup steps. Here I just created some code to kind of get rid of stuff I didn't. Let's get some more interesting stuff though. I mentioned template is not in Canvas. At least I didn't think so for a while. So I found the pseudonyms table. Canvas has a field they use in multiple tables when it's talking about an individual student called user ID or value user ID. It's in classes because they want to know what students are in what class. Learning outcome results are results for an individual student, so it has the value user ID. I joined those because I want to share the data that I got from classes, the learning outcomes, but I want to get it into an template. So I join, using another join, getting with the pseudonyms table. Where they had a really catchy name of the field you want called value.sis_user/ID. Flows like poetry. That is why I'm sharing this presentation as little esoteric, sharing this esoterics for folks, because you don't need to be searching this stuff out. This is just how it works. So the join, once again, I named stuff so that they shared a common name, trying to just make it a little more digestible. Joining sections, this one's cool. Jackie, you can attest to this. When we first started working with this, I was trying to join SIS class data with Canvas data. And they had so many different conventions. And in our old system, like Hyperion, I was going to join on college, term, snapshot, course, section, 5 different elements to join together. Canvas didn't make it so, and Tableau does not work with it well that way. With all of those individual joins, it really creaked. It was like hearing that ship that's going through a rough seas and your pops and groans. You don't want to hear when you're out in the ocean. So eventually I found in both Canvas and SIS a field that is kind of like the cheat sheet, the Rosetta Stone, the way to be able to join them together, where they concatenate the college, term information, section number, so that I can join them on those elements. I just have to do a little cleanup to get them identical. So in SIS, it looks like this, if you can see it on the screen. And in Canvas, it looks like this. But life is never so easy. They spell summer differently. Sometimes they're in uppercase, sometimes they're not. So you got to do some cleansing. You don't have to do it. It's already taken care of. But those are just some of the fun elements about why are we missing summer data.
There's some comments in the chat too.
I had a few comments when I was writing.
I apologize if it's off.
I don't believe so.
There's a comment, small data sets make it easier to figure out methodology and then scale up to more participation. So that's probably.
Great point. When I'm doing development, not so much even for this one anymore, I might restrict something to like a single semester, restricted to a single course, maybe even a single section. Because then it's very quick. Don't go with something this big right off the bat. This was not the first project to jump into if you've never used any of this. Great questions. Other questions?
I don't think so. I think we're good. Just
Is this too much? Is this making sense? Templates on templates. Figure it out. Field and description. You're going to need to do some coding here. Quite often, redundant slide. Let's skip through that, sorry. A lot of cleanup once again. Now, this is where it starts getting kind of interesting as well. Let's say you've got your data set working really well. You'll love it. It seems like it's making sense and it's going to work for you. This is where you have it developed, you know it's going to work. This is where you can kind of start saving it as a public data source so that you can tap into it anytime you need it. First of all, you've kind of got to declare where do you want to store it. If you want to store it, you had better store it underneath your own college's data. The first tab is being able to save the output to. I want to save it as a published data source. The default is file, where it's going to put that hyper file on your desktop, which is great, but it doesn't automatically refresh. You save it as a PDF, it can be set up to refresh. You choose your project. It's going to take you to some kind of weird default, crazy folder that you can't save to. But you have a drop down where you can choose your college. I actually save my data source files, flow files. I save them in an Australia folder in production or development. And I call this folder ad hoc because it's kind of one-off examples. Might make more sense to save it in data source, but I'm not there yet. And give it a name, you'll know what it is. I know it's Australia. I know it's student learning outcome data, and it's a data source. And then do as I say, not as I do. Put in a description so people know what the heck it is. If I do it, next slide, please. At this point, key thing to point out is the way our existing data was set up. Canvas had no way of knowing it was a program, course, institutional level learning outcome. Each is important. If I want to report on it, I have to have a way of knowing what it is. So I found it to be cumbersome and slow if I did it in desktop. So what I wanted to do is to start trying to do that same coding, but doing it in prep. So I had to use tricks. If it knew it was an ILO, I wanted it to pick that up automatically, but there are going to be instances where you don't know. That's where the hard coding comes into play. So for our ILOs, all of them had to be hard coded. For our PLOs, some did. And I kind of used the logic of sometimes when we first started, we didn't have consistency, and that's minor. I didn't request consistency. Sometimes we had a PLO underscore, sometimes we had PLO colon. I had to build both into the code. And then I went with the default. If it's not an ILO, if it's not a PLO, I went with the assumption of default of it as a forced learning outcome, or CLO. Forcing the coding right off the bat. Yes.
A question, is that like what we just saw in the last session where you're like, make sure it starts with PLOs?
Yes.
So that negate or like
Yes.
kind of fixes this.
That list I gave to folks in the room was a listing of what they call the short description behind the scenes. It's the name when you add the learning outcome. It's when it says name, that's what you key in. That's what this is referring to.
Okay.
So starting it with an ILO, I know it's an ILO.
Okay.
And because of this coding I have built in, Canvas automatically knows it's an ILO and it's going to assign that type of. This is just a subset of some of the kind of coding I had to do. Because it did not know for all of those ILOs what they were. So I manually had to say, With this was the languaging I used to say if it was citation, or if it is eye contact or format, blah, blah, blah. Those were ILOs. Later, I have to say it's an ILO, which is critical thinking. Or later, I have to say it's an ILO. It's written and verbal communication. Separately, I'll explain.
Jim, can I chime in? We got something on the online.
Please do, Matt.
Yes, question from Mesa, Jajang. The difficult part, sometimes I have no idea what the short description means and it looks random. Basically, for MCC, ILOs look well coded. All of the other SLOs are very messy.
Yes. Yay! Job security, Matt. We were fortunate that we kept things pretty small for most of ours. Not everybody did that. And no fault of their own. No one knew. No one used the data this way. And so that's part of why I wanted to share this is, consider the impact of how we're putting stuff into Canvas. That's why I'm doing a full day. Matt, does that answer that question or concern?
Yeah, we'll see if Zion chimes in. Jeffrey Anderson just pinged in as well to say, I want to say that the Canvas ILO data fields labels can be changed to be more consistently coded. Now, again, that's referring to the ILOs, and I know Zion was referring to the SLOs can get messier down the line as you go down the web, I suppose.
My observations, however, are if it is, I can change the descriptions, no problem. But for the data that has already been graded, it doesn't give me that luxury. I think it's storing that information elsewhere. I may be wrong in that, but that was my brief testing, is it keeps the coding it had when it was graded, which really stinks.
Copy. I think that answered the questions too. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you. That's a great question. Very observant. You'll notice that I did this really ugly coding because there's a function that I like to use in desktop called in or include. For inside parentheses, I can list the 4 short descriptions, which are critical thinking. In fact, you have it in one record, it's very easy to understand. It doesn't work in prep. So I had to hard code it, make it a little more cumbersome. Now descriptions, this is where I kept on preaching and Jake kept on preaching about using a text editor to bring your data in. Because if there's HTML, it's gonna come with it. It may be hard to see, but this is some of the syntax and using the reg edit coding that strips out a lot of that HTML code. And I have an enhanced version of it on my live sample. Takes care of a couple of more, but this cleans out all that ugliness. And I sometimes also use trim to get rid of excess spaces. Because what drives me nuts is sometimes people will put a lot of spaces before they start typing text. And then alphabetical order is blown. If you've never worked with the regedit and replace all that stuff, sometimes I have found that I'll write it and it doesn't render nearly what I expected. Instead of getting really frustrated, I found it better to drop back deep, take the snap, and punt the ball, write it fresh again. Because sometimes it just doesn't clean up right. I don't know why, don't understand, don't really care to understand. I just found sometimes going get a cup of coffee, coming back with a fresh attempt renders exactly what I needed it to do. That just may be me, I don't know. But nothing else, I always try to get it going. Thoughts, questions so far?
For the comment, excuse me. When you're putting the comments in, do you have a shorthand because you are limited to the 200 characters? Do you have certain abbreviations or something that you might use consistently through that we might want to consider using?
good question. Because I'm not taking the data out anywhere else, it's pretty much my code, so I just try to put as few words as possible. Some things have a lot of detail, I can't squeeze it into 200 characters, I focus on the basic. I work with some. And so I want to explain the things that are not in code. That's what I focus on. It's great to create additional documentation elsewhere, but I lose PDFs. I forget what I call them. I know me, and so this puts it all in one bucket, so it's just easier. So keep it simple. Great question. Other questions?
So I have worked off of this, so I think Jim does an amazing job that it's, like you said, it's very intuitive. I may have only put a couple notes for myself, on my version, but mostly I found it all to be very helpful because when you come back to it, it is a lot of pieces that you just kind of look and say, okay, this is where we got. This is where we got it, So I think it's really done. Really relatable.
We're a good old boy from Texas. I gotta keep it simple. And so this helps me hone in specifically when something is going wrong. This helps me find it quickly. And I just do a few clicks instead of having to read through thousands of lines of code. Not that I have thousands of lines of code. We want to take a very brief break, or do you want to just keep on pressing through? Right. I would prefer on giving people 5 minutes than creating a lack of comfort in the room. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
I'll stop recording.
Thanks, Howard.
Speaking here, you're on mute on the line.
Sorry about that online.
No, you got it perfect. Thank you.
We just got a little too enthusiastic with having a break. You guys at home have the advantage of being able to go to the coffee pot, so. Now we're gonna get started. It's gonna start getting a little more fun and exciting for everyone but Nathan. You love all this stuff. In this circumstance, to this point, we have a flow, but who cares? What am I doing with it? This is where you start actually doing something with it. First of all, you take a look at it. If you have it created and you see a whole bunch of red marks on it, it's never good in third grade, it's never good now. Particularly red triangles, there's a problem. You got to go figure out what it is and debug it. No red triangles, publish it. Any wild guesses what button you click to publish? Publish, thank you. Anyone? Bueller. Once you click on publish, it's going to ask you where you want to save it. The default project is resources/examples/training. Don't use that. It will not work for you. Choose your own college. A best practice technically is just save it until you're ready to go with it. Save it in the development folder for your college. Do I always do that? I also drive over 55 miles an hour. Some things I just don't do.
Oh, nice, Art. She,
Yeah.
I already got me. I'm like, already got me. Did it again.
Name it, save it to your folder. Give it a name that makes sense. Do as I say, give it a good description so that an outsider, when you win the lottery, will be able to figure out what it is. And consider the possibility of using tags. I've started using tags more and more. They're great to be able to find Straya and our Tableau directory. We've started going with that route. It's a nice addition. I'll be glad to show you all one-on-one if you have further questions. And once again, when it's ready to publish, you click on publish. And once it publishes, it's saving it to the Tableau server where you told it to send it. And it's going to give you a pop-up that says publishing complete. Close out the pop-up. I tend to be a little bit OCD on some of this stuff. So I like to go through and kind of check on things. Now, first of all, now I've got the data source there, or the data flow there. Two kinds of files we're going to talk about in Tableau Prep. There's the flow, then there's the data source. The flow is what you write to create the data source. Think about the flow as the vehicle, the data source is the outcome. So we've just saved to the server the flow. If you want to run it, you click on run. And because it is also OCD, then it tells you to click on run now. And I promise it will run. Now, because I obsess, I like to kind of check on things because I'm just that way. So I like to click on run history. There's a tab. And you can see the status. If it says scheduled to run, there are probably a lot of things going on across the district at the same time. Now, if given my druthers, sometimes I'll try to run it late at night when I know no one else is working like a fool, so that I can know if the problem is my development is very fudgy, or is it just simply a lot of backlog on the server? Because I like to kind of have a read, because I do find that things run quicker later in the day. I see it's running. When it's done, it gives me a validation, which I need very much in my data. It tells me it's succeeded, and it tells me how many rows it generated. This is extremely useful because I can't tell you how many times I've developed it, I've run it, and it tells me I've succeeded, but I have 0 rows. And if I have 0 rows, there is a problem with my flow because there was no data that it could find to match what's going on. And usually the problem was because some glitch in a filter that I set up or some join. So at this point, I've run it once. This is where it gets useful. There's scheduled tasks. There's an opportunity to create a new task. Why, pray tell? With the new task, you can schedule it so that it's going to run every working, right now it's set up, I run it every workday, Monday through Friday at 12:40. They may make that less frequent down the road. They may also change the timing, but that's what the only option that exists right now. So if I go to the scheduled tasks, I can click on new task. That gives me the ability to schedule. Where you hit the drop down, you can choose anything you want as long as it's the one that's available. And I don't think I've ever done anything other than a full refresh. And again, I'll go to that scheduled tasks and make sure that it says scheduled so that it's built in. And some of you IR folks have seen this before that we did at the All IR Council conversation. So now you have a flow and you have a data source, which still doesn't do a darn thing for you until you start using it. This is where you can start using it. If you're going to start from scratch, I would go here. I would choose Tableau Server. And because I know the name of everything I've created starts with EM, it gives me a shortcut to be able to filter to just mine, and then I click on it. All there is to scheduling your data source to be automatically refreshed and adding a data source to it. Pretty cool. Questions, thoughts, contemplations, reflections, manifestations, frustrations? articulations, conjugations, United Nations. Like a Bob Dylan song. A quick review at Estrella, this is where it gets a little bit more clutchy. We've already identified the learning outcome types. Got to go into a little more detail here. These are the types we have at Estrella. But within a type for ILOs for us, we have what I had to create a new category called subtypes. Because we have about 30 some odd ILO level. But within that, we have 3 categories. Critical thinking, which has about 4 of them. Writing and composition, which has 10. And oral communication, which has the rest of it. And then I split it in half because there's verbal and written, or verbal and physical. And it just doesn't show as well on the dashboard having it all up together. You'll have your own structure. If this is a way you want to, if this is something you want to do and you're going to have a way of working with it, you'll probably want to tweak with this. Jackie, with her stuff, has definitely been coming up with her own combinations to make it work for her needs.
Jim, can I jump in real quick with an online question?
Please, Matt.
Yes, another question to Jim. Have you got further into the rubric and grading criteria level? There is a request from my college that asks for this kind of reporting. I think it's more granular than CLO. For example, an assignment has a rubric, kind of like a grading guideline, with a list of criteria, and the total score of that assignment is a sum of points from all criteria under the rubric. The rubric and criteria may be shared with other assignments in the same class. I know that's a huge mouthful and I can copy paste whatever we need to do with that, but
I could take a,
Please do it, and then I'll have some follow-up.
so, yeah, because a lot of that information, from what I know, doesn't go into Canvas, so you couldn't get like, let's say, as a faculty member, I create a rubric, unless every item in that rubric is designed as a Canvas outcome. That information I don't think is going into any report, so it can't be pulled. So, I don't know, yeah, so I think I don't know that there's easy ways to get additional information. I know Canvas pulls what the overall grade of the assignment, and then just any outcome associated, right?
There are some additional tables. Okay, I'll go here. Turn off the mic, please.
Oh, okay.
Ask another great question. Part of the joyous stuff that you can turn this on. Okay. Part of the fun of this new set of data that I had for the last 6 months is that where they used to have separate tables for all the rubric descriptions, exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, below expectations, and whatever you say, they used to have that as a separate table. Now, with the data that they gave us, it includes in one field a combination of points, the descriptions, the mastery description, the overall description, about 9 different variables in one text field. It's inconsistent. The order that they're in changes left and right. Some colleges have 3, or some individuals used a scale with 3 points. One individual, God bless their soul, decided to have a 20-point scale. Out of morbid curiosity, I went through Estrella, the worst was 6 points of scale. I did the coding just to see how ugly it would be to separate that. There were 120 calculations to give one variable to be able to render that. And I sure wasn't going to do that for 20. Mastery allows me to circumvent that. That's why I went with that. The second reason I went with that. We have recently gained access to a couple more tables after some requests. I'm very appreciative of getting those. So I might be able to get those so it's not so ugly in the descriptions, but I don't go down to the top. Great question. That's why I went with master. The second reason is in the prior version of data, we had it broken out by exceeds, meets, below, et cetera. Folks weren't using that data. They didn't really understand. Yeah, they would ask me, well, what's the difference between meets and exceeds? And I'm like, it's your classroom. I don't know. Only you can answer that. It's your learning grade. Mastery, it's more technical. And particularly because your rubric, sync learning, ILO is different than mine. My assignment is different than yours. Mastery is kind of that central limit theorem where you kind of just let it all work out across the big picture. Great question. I don't know that that's the answer you wanted, but it's can. Yes, ma'am.
Can I speak from the faculty perspective of how you determine needs versus exceeds versus are? So when we did our business faculty, and I'm also the assessment coordinator, sorry, I was I was teaching this morning, but when we set up our learning outcomes, we have first to be transparent, we have a pre-graded assignment that students do in third party. So they get a score, but then based on that score is how we define, the faculty define, if you can score between this and this, you're this and this, and this, that. Knowing you need a C or better, it kind of, being pretty cut and dry in that respect. But I think in faculty, and we don't grade off of which we assess the success or not of the students in that way. And so if you determine your ranges of what scoring is, that's what, but that's a way that I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. There's a lot to digest. That's why I keep on saying there are social as well as technical systems involved with this. Just having to figure out how to work through them. Now, for those of y'all who work with Tableau developers, down in that bottom right-hand corner, you see three kinds of boxes. There's the opportunity to create a worksheet, dashboard, and a story. In this example, this dashboard that I'm using for Estrella, we have multiple stories. Within the story, there are two dashboards. Within each dashboard, there is a worksheet. So it gives me that ability to kind of drill down. One additional thing to throw out is for those instances when folks want to know down to maybe an assignment level. I have another dashboard available. People are not necessarily comfortable sharing what their own stuff is across the district. How do my students fare in this singular assignment? However, people want to know that about their own stuff. They just don't want to share it. I created a separate story so that in the header, part of what it has is a hyperlink. It says, if you don't see data below, click on this and you can issue a data request to OPI, our team, to give you a sound report. And there's something called the user filter, which I just started using a few weeks ago, which is phenomenal inside Tableau. So that I can set it up that only a select people I want to see the actual data can see it. So the first field in this report I have for folks is going to be the learning outcome. And I only allow my team, OPI, John, Sandy, and Matt, to be able to see the actual data where we can export it, take it to Excel, and do some customization. It's a really nice, non-threatening way to get the data folks want and giving them a way to issue the data request instead of just grabbing you in the hallway and saying, hey, can you? Because those don't work. I've used a few parameters. Details, time frame, slices. Slices is a Microsoft term in case you aren't familiar with it. It's just another fancy way of saying filters. Here I say filters, go figure. I built into our ILOs, I can choose the ILO within it. I can choose the detail. Because these four are all a part of critical thinking. I made the decision to be able, and I've changed it slightly, being able to see the data by academic year, fall only, spring only, or summer. I got rid of the all terms because some folks couldn't quite follow the cycle. I liked it, but made it a lot easier to report it as well. Finally, on slices, I wound up just putting it in one option. You can either get the demographic data or you can get the class data. Because if I had demographics combined with classes, again, I'm going to get into this issue. I don't want to identify a singular student. I don't want to make them stand out. So I kind of limited how much in depth you can develop from here. Finally, one more, I know this is flashy, but when you filter on number 2, set ILO detail, I'm choosing just reasoning as a portion of critical thinking. And now I want to look at written and verbal written communication. I don't have a way easily in Tableau, unless manually going and changing 2, except 1. I have a reset SLO button and it clears the filters. So then you can kind of start again from research. It's just a clicking thing. It's kind of a nice add to the toolbox. This talks about the less than 5 rule. Coding was fun.
Yeah.
Woohoo. The trick of doing this is to identify all these slices. And then I basically said, if I have 5 or more responses that meet this this portion of it, like over 25 is an age thing. If I have 5 or more, I'm going to say it's over 25. If I have 4 or less, I'm going to lump it into group less than 5. So that's just all this logic does. It's actually easy to write. It just looks up things. Lots of questions, including online, other than make the bad man stop.
Nothing online. Julie gave a nice document with GCC's Canvas stuff. So
I just wanted them to see what you're dealing with when the data is getting pulled out, that it's a hot mess.
Yes. And it's, Jackie's been very, very strong in going through and cleaning up a whole lot of that. So kudos to her. Now's the point where you IR folks are going to really kind of perk up the ears, because this is the stuff that I can't fix for you in my normal job. This is some of the college edits. Go figure, you got to change your header. You got to change your logo, your colors. Palettes. Use the palettes that are provided for you from district. You're going to need to edit the subtypes. Make sure the categories work for you. You're going to need to clean up the data as needed. Clean up the descriptions, etc. It's not bad. It's not hard. It's just a little tedious. And the hardest part is going to be that initial coding where you identify this learning outcome is an ILO, and having to create that renaming. This is a sample of the code. When you have a look at the data or the presentation, you'll be able to see it in more detail. So I want to give folks a chance to talk amongst yourselves for 5 minutes about, is there support? Is this something you think you're going to want to go down that path? Because if not, that's cool. I understand. But there's some power to it. Think about, is there interest in pursuing this? What learning outcomes do you already have developed? Do you have support from a lot of the key players? How do you want to filter it? What terms? This is kind of getting down to, if you want to actualize this, some of the stuff that you're going to need to start kind of asking. Because this is preparing you to move on to the next phase, if it's something. So spend a couple minutes, talk amongst yourselves.
One session, should we do breakout sessions?
Yeah, let's do a brief breakout session.
For the online folks, I'll repost the link to that previous document. Let's just do a free form chat in there.
Thank you, Matt.
Sorry for the online, I was having issues with the breakout, so I tried. It's the end of the day.
I'm gonna ask a question, and it's like, I'm open to whatever you have to say, because I know just what we've done today is a lot. We've covered a lot of different content and ideas, and it may or may not be something that'll work for your college. It reminds me of an old joke of a newlywed couple, and it was Thanksgiving time. Didn't know how to cook, so asked for the recipe for how to cook turkey. Got the recipe, the couple was looking at it, and it all made perfect sense with the exception of it said, cut off the legs of the bird and then put it in the oven. Didn't make sense, but they followed the recipe, they cooked it, the taste was phenomenal. They invited the aunt that they got the recipe from. And she's like, that bird was great. Well, why did you cut off the legs? And the couple looked confused, saying, we got the recipe from you. Why did you say for us to cut off the legs of the turkey? And the aunt started laughing, saying, it's because that's the only way it can fit in my oven. This is something that works relatively well for Australia. It may or may not work for your college. I get that. It may need some customization, like blending. Is this something y'all are thinking you want to pursue? Other colleges? And no, it's perfectly fine answer. I'm just curious. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you don't want to share, that's cool too. Or is it just a lot to think about?
I think I'm just worried about like how much, like if it's a plug and play thing that we can just go in and change, Australia to Gateway. That would be ideal. I know it's not necessarily, but I think there would be a lot of like institutional change that we'd have to make for our faculty to do this.
Wait, did you say want to do it?
Yeah. Want to do it this way.
There are other systems that do it more beautifully, but they're expensive and there's still implementation costs. So it's just one solution. I just want to be, candid and just kind of say, hey, I can understand either way. But I at least wanted to share one possibility. If it is something you want to pursue, start thinking about how far back do you want to go with the data. Start thinking about what's already in the system and what are the skill sets you have or need to have to be able to move forward. Because I'm all about being pragmatic in a project management kind of model like this.
Jim, if I can jump in from the online group.
Please.
Felicia from PVCC, yes, there is support to dig into this data and use it well. We have the challenge of upgrading our home-built assessment management software, so I'm looking for ideas to help use us to do that. Zaihong at MCC, our four ILOs are coded well and easily recognizable in the Canvas data lake. And we already have an ILO dashboard. We're looking at more into diving into those PLOs, CLOs, and the rubric, kind of that more detail. And good support at MCC from the IR and Assessment Committee. And then I think I echoed the same things as far as great support from ours, and obviously our department, you built this this whole thing. So the more data we can get, I know they just changed that data source over. So the more data that's available is the better. And the longitudinal question, I think is a great one. That's what you were just tying into, was how far back do we go? Because that can really impact and make the queries and the things that we're able to pull more tangible if depending on how far back and how longitudinal we have to go, right?
Yes, great point. And I'm a big believer in longitudinal data because I'm a statistical process control background kind of guy. So good points. Think about it. If you ever want to just shoot the bull, you know where I live. Just reach out. I'd be glad to talk to anybody about this stuff because it's something I'm very passionate about. Brief conversation about descriptions. We're using the short description. Occasionally, you may find in your data, it's missing either a full description or a short description. If it's not including a short description, I am excluding. You need that. If it's missing a long description, I've set in the coding so that it picks up and uses the short description as the full description. And if it doesn't make sense to anybody, it's ugly. Got a lot of other things to talk about, so I'm going to kind of fly through a few things. This is a kind of cool screen. I mentioned a little bit about that report for taking data down to an assignment level. In Tableau, one of the options is the ability to go in and use a user filter. I swear by this now. This is an example where the only people who can see the elements on my dashboard are the folks I've added. I call it an OPI only with our team of Excel developers or Tableau developers. So I put in the names and then I can identify, in this case, the learning outcomes, short descriptions. And for us, I chose all of those members and went and clicked on OK. Any of those things we can see. That's the first field and the data. Can't see those, you're not going to see any of it. If you hide that one you want to limit access to the right, you can see the stuff to the left of it. So you can do field specific filtering, which is really cool. Haven't used it yet, looking forward to it. Matt actually pointed out some cool things about that as well. If you haven't, try it. Last of the kludgy stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about testing and troubleshooting. Be nice to your CTL staff for many reasons. One, they're delightful people. Second of all, if you play nice, share toys, and are good to others, brush your teeth, and vote often, they may give you the ability to have administrative rights. It is extremely helpful to understand how Canvas works when developing dashboards around it. I always try to get access to the source data. This is a way of doing so. If you have access, it'll work like this somewhat. I go to admin, settings. This is going to get me to the two reports that I use. It's all I use my admin rights for. Reports. There are two reports. Outcome reports. That gives me a report for whatever level of detail I'm in. It's going to give me a report indicating these are the learning outcomes stored at that level. So if I am in Spanish humanities, it will give me a report just saying Spanish humanities outcomes in Canvas, whether they have been graded or not. The second report is outcome results. It will give me, in that same Spanish humanities, results of all the learning outcomes that have been graded. So if my dashboard only renders 4 records and this has 4,000, I know there's a problem. Just a nice way to troubleshoot what's going on. But if you don't have administrator rights, you won't get this. Some colleges are taking this file, and when you download it, taking that and manually loading it into Tableau, and that's a perfectly wonderful way to work with it. But you're not going to get everything, and you're also going to have to manually update that. And I am way too old and tired and used up to want to manually update anything that I can automate. Najma, you had a point?
I was just gonna add, as far as the admin rights, so that can be challenging, only because I know with working with district, try to be very safeguard our admin rights. So getting Jim, basically, because obviously he works in IR, it's a lot easier. But just to say, it might even, it's not as always a CTL decision. So sometimes we have to go to certain channels, but in Jim's case, since he does work with data anyway, we were able to get him because he has the same admin rights that I have as a campus administrator. And I'll just put it out there, it wasn't easy to do. So that could be a barrier, maybe not. But I just want to give you that heads up that we don't, as a CTL, we don't just grant. It takes a certain type, role rather to get that kind of right. It's it, yeah. And it's restricted.
And as much as I enjoy working with this,
Yeah.
If I didn't need this data, I wouldn't want access.
Understood.
It's because it's the best way of understanding and troubleshooting what I have going on. This is a ton of content, and we're running a little bit over in terms of this block. Told you this was going to be the top one, but the gist of it is this tool is using prep to cleanse the data, manipulate it, try to get it simpler. I will share the presentation to show a little bit of how, and you're free to download examples to play with it at your leisure, customize it for your own college.